What is up, everybody? Isaac here with Civil Engineering Academy. Excited to be with you on another podcast episode. Thanks for liking and subscribing and doing all that good stuff that helps us out with the old algorithm. Today, I bring a special guest on. Her name is Bryce Batts. She actually runs a great company called the Career Collective that she is the chief matchmaker on. So she helps people locate a better career and get you recruited in the right way and develop relationships between you and an employer. But she also wrote a book that's coming out in October, and it's called The Career Architect. And this thing will outline everything you need to do to boost your career and, have the best possible chance to really make a difference in your own career. And so we talk about all these tips, all this advice related to boosting your career in the AEC industry. And I really try to tailor that to civil engineers, and she helps a ton of them. But if you ever need help or advice in your own career, she's a great person and great resource to reach out to. And I think you're really going to enjoy this episode. So check this one out. Go get the book when it comes out in October, The Career Architect. And I will go ahead and shut up. Let me get to this interview with Bryce. You're really going to enjoy this one, and we will see you there. See you in a minute. All right, we are rocking and rolling. Bryce, thanks for joining me on the Civil Engineering Academy podcast. Appreciate you doing this with me.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited. I know we connected, and we probably looked at each other's LinkedIn profiles and such, but you're really helping out the AEC industry on the recruiting front. But I think you're doing a lot of good work there. I wanted to kind of kick this off telling us about your own background. How did you find yourself into this industry, working with AEC career professionals, and give us a description of what you're doing?
Yeah. Okay. I feel like I have to take it back kind of far to give you the full picture of the story. So graduated from NC State in 2001, was dating my now husband, but he is an architect and got a job in South Florida. So we moved down there. And I was trying to figure out what I was going to do. I was a business major and decided to go back, get my MBA, met a friend at school there in South Florida. And she said, you should do recruiting. This is where I'm working. It's all AEC recruiting. It's what your husband or boyfriend at the time, it's what he does. She's like, just come try it. I was like, all right, I'll give it a shot. And I absolutely fell in love with recruiting. And so AEC recruiting is really all I've ever done. That was a small firm I worked for a very long time. And then my now business partner, he and I left that company to start Career Collective about 3.5 years ago. So he moved from Denver. I was already here in Raleigh with a family. So he said, I'll come to you. And now we have an office here in Raleigh and one in Tampa, and still just do AEC recruiting nationwide.
That's awesome. So AEC is kind of a big, I guess, category. Is there specific disciplines that you tailor your services to? Is this kind of open-ended, or what's that like?
Yeah, great question. So we do a lot more A&E, a lot of civil engineering, a lot of MEP, and then some architecture as well. Less on the construction side. We'd like to do more of that at some point, but we do a lot more A&E right now.
Okay. And you've got a book coming out. Is that true?
I do. That is true. The rumor is true.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about that and what inspired you to write that?
Yeah, it's called The Career Architect, How to Build a Career That Aligns with Your Vision and Values. And it was a fun project. It still remains to be a project because it's going to be released October 1st. So, this may come out a few weeks later. So if so, look it up on Amazon. But I've had my podcast, Wine After Work, for about 4 years. I've had so many great conversations with so many women and some men on the podcast. And I thought I need to weave these stories into a book and really lay out a plan for people, because we spend so much time at work. Our paths are very rarely linear. And so I wanted to tell their stories, and it includes a workbook and questions so you can really map out what an aligned career looks like.
That's awesome. So in there, I think you talk about blueprint principles. Is that correct? I mean, there's certain from those principles. Is there some tips that maybe you could share with our audience from the book?
Yeah, for sure. So I think start with a self-assessment, know your skills and constraints before choosing a direction. And I think for engineers, so many times you go to school and then you come out and you're like, who do I want to work for? What do I want to do? And I think you really need to do internships, co-ops, and maybe job shadow people. Talk to a lot of folks to figure out where you want to be exactly. Some other blueprints I love to talk about are working 90-day sprints. And I had someone on the podcast tell me this, but really, I don't want to say grind, but maybe you're head down, really focused for 90 days, and then you come up for air for the next 90. And really work in those types of stints. Now, I know engineering is very deadline driven. You can't just completely let your foot off the gas, but maybe you're going a bit harder for 90 days. And then QA QC, so regularly review what's working and what might need a redesign. And then think about those habits that are repeatable too. So networking, continued learning, and things like that.
That's great advice. I'm curious, in the AEC industry, it seems like it's very male dominated. I'm sure you've worked with females though in this industry. Do you have any tips for females that have found themselves in the AEC industry, what they should be doing to advance their career? And maybe to just tack on to that, like what's the benefit of using someone like you in your services?
Yeah, great question. So I think men and women have to do similar things. Engineers need to work on their soft skills. A lot of times, they're so smart, but they come out of school and they really need to listen more than they talk so they can continue to learn. Working on public speaking is always helpful, but you see a lot of women leave the profession between years 10 and 20, and that's because of childcare, no upward mobility, and things like that. And you hear sandwich generation a lot now. We're taking care of kids and aging parents, and it just gets to be too much in the industry. So I think going back to the book, you really have to design a career that fits within your life. So really thinking about your vision and values and what's going to work, and setting boundaries and seeking out sponsorship or mentorship or both is really helpful. And a lot of great women in AEC have told me they have a wonderful ally in a man, whether it's a colleague or someone, at even a competitor company who's making a way for them. And that's really helpful.
What do you tell people that maybe felt like they chose the wrong pathway in their career? Maybe they've graduated, they're down the civil engineering route, and maybe they're feeling like either their career isn't a fit for them. Any advice for them?
Yeah, I think take time to pause. I'm big on journaling, really sit and think about what's working and what's not. I know engineers are very technical, so maybe you pull up an Excel sheet and you start writing in the values and scoring those values and kind of keeping a score sheet on what's working and what's not. I think that's really helpful because, again, you don't have to stay where you are. There are so many opportunities within civil engineering and then within AEC. And then even if you decide to get out of the industry, and we hope you don't because we already have a labor shortage within engineering, maybe it's just a new company that you need to find. Or, you talked a little bit earlier about private versus public, maybe you just need to pivot there. But there are so many opportunities. So it's just about getting clear on what is going to work for you and for your family.
That definitely makes sense. I know you've probably worked with a ton of different engineers. Are there some common themes you see as to why engineers leave jobs? Would you have any tips for companies to better retain their employees?
So many tips. Yeah, you see some companies doing it really well. I was talking to a firm recently and they said they had 3 women who all became mothers and now work for them and work remotely, and it's working really well. I do think during COVID, we all learned that we could be hybrid, maybe not remote, but there is some flexibility to be had there. So I think, keeping in mind what people are looking for when you're looking at Gen X versus Gen Z, we operate pretty differently. And Gen Z, they have pretty good boundaries, and they don't want to work till midnight. And I remember that's how my husband's career started, pulling all-nighters. And I know, again, it's a deadline-driven business, but I think having some flex policies around hours, also hybrid work is really important. And then, having a clear path for growth as well. That's one of the main things that I see. It's like an unclear career ladder or lack of mentorship. So they don't know where they're going to go. And then you've heard the old adage that people don't leave jobs, they leave bad bosses. And so that happens a lot. People, especially in AEC, get thrown into leadership or project management with very little training. And then how are they supposed to be a great leader when they've not had any training and they're coming from a very technical standpoint? And then, of course, always compensation is a big one if there's a compensation lag, and then misaligned projects.
When people do switch jobs or career, different employers, are you seeing a large increase in salary trends? I mean, is there a kind of a ballpark percentage that people are getting if they bounce around versus, and maybe this is another question, is there a benefit to sticking with the company versus moving to a different company?
Yeah, I think having those conversations with your current employer, if you think it's a place you want to stay, that's really important. We always tell people, look, if you want to look for a new position as recruiters, of course, we're happy to help you. But if it's just money that you're looking for, let's go back to your current employer first and see if you can get a raise. Instead of wasting everyone's time by interviewing with 3 or 4 companies and getting offers that you have no intention of taking, and then taking a counter offer back to your employer. Now, if it's more than money, maybe you talk to your current employer about what they can do to make accommodations. But if you find that they're not, and you are going to leave, typically, yes, you can get a raise. And that's why a lot of people leave. I say the average is anywhere between 10 and 20%, depending on the level of the employee, and how much money they're making currently. If they're overpaid already or underpaid or status quo. But yeah, you can see a pretty big jump, which is why a lot of younger engineers, you will see them leaving and each year or every 2 years, but they've also been told for a while that's the only way to make more money. So I think it comes back to education and having that open dialogue to make sure they're happy while they're there, and be talking to them before you get to the point where you're doing an exit interview. Be more proactive rather than reactive.
Yeah, that makes sense. And, some engineers are hesitant to bring that up, but maybe if someone does mention it, you probably should explore it and see if we can have a further discussion about it, because sometimes engineers, they'll go get the other offer, and then you're counter offering and you have to make a decision on staying or leaving. So
yeah. And I feel like there's so much mistrust once you get to the counter offer stage. It's like, can you beat this offer that I have in my hand, or am I going somewhere else? Right. And then they know you were looking, and it can be an awkward situation for everyone. That's why I say have the conversation first if it's possible.
Very true. I'm curious, in your opinion, you mentioned some trends. You said there's a big labor shortage for AEC professionals. I know, we're out of COVID, work from home was a big deal, but what are some trends that are still happening, that you are seeing in the field?
Yeah, a lot of people still want at least hybrid work. Of course, great benefits, good pay. But the biggest reason they come to us is either pay or their work schedule. And once a company has been tagged as a company that overworks their people, people leave reviews on Glassdoor and Indeed, and it can be really hard to then fix your reputation. So I think it's really important to have those conversations early on and make sure you're driving a culture that is sustainable for everyone.
Makes sense. And I know you've coached a lot of AEC professionals. You've probably run across many that feel happy and fulfilled in what they're doing. Are there some common themes that you've seen in those that feel like they're satisfied with what they're doing?
Yeah, for sure. There's so many good firms out there and with really good benefits. I'll mention this quickly. I had a friend who she's on the talent acquisition side, but just got a great job with a civil engineering firm. And what made the decision for her, even though she didn't want to go in every day, was they offered either IVF support or adoption support. And her husband were looking into adoption. So I thought that was a really cool benefit and something that differentiated them. And that's what helped her make her decision. So you can get really creative. And I know for small firms it can be harder, but that's where, unlimited PTO, of course, at manager's discretion, or a hybrid work schedule is not going to cost a small firm if you do it the right way and have open lines of communication, not going to cost them a lot of money. But reasons people stay: transparent career paths. If they understand that they can continue to move up with the company, they will stay. And younger engineers, they want to be promoted. Talking about Gen Z again, they want to be promoted within 12 to 18 months. So you've got to be able to lay out a path for them. Yeah. And then, of course, training is always great, to be able to train them up to eventually be project managers or in leadership. And then offering support for licensure, paying for it if they pass the exam, or paying for the courses that they need to take. And then I'll say it again, instituting real flex policies when it comes to hours or schedules, even, really good PTO.
Yeah, those are all good things. I think I have found myself in the same situation. I feel fulfilled when all of those things are happening and happy in the career that I'm in. So, you touched on the PE license. I'm curious if you could explore a little bit, like what's the value of the PE that for civil engineers, but what's the value of earning that PE, at least that you've seen in helping professionals?
Yeah, I think it opens a lot of doors for you. There's going to be more opportunities available to you if you have your PE. I'm a big proponent of getting your EIT while you're still in school, if you can. I know a lot of colleges offer it now, while you're in school. I just think it makes so much more sense. You're used to studying, you're already in that habit. So get your EIT. And then depending on the state you're in, of course, you can get your PE, before you have 4 years of experience. So again, I would say for both, take them as soon as you can, as soon as you're eligible. And then it is going to open a lot of doors for you. And if consulting is what you want to do, you'll need to have a PE at some point.
For sure. I think also earning that PE you mentioned opens up a lot of doors. One of them is that you could start your own company, your own firm, consultancy. So have you ever helped anybody in those shoes trying to start their own business that way?
I have one of my first coaching clients. She was an architect and her husband was in construction, and they wanted to start a design build firm. So yeah, I think, having your PE or your architectural license will allow you to start your own firm if that's what you want to do, which can be really exciting. And of course, you'll need to have all those things in place.
Yeah. Well, we love helping people earn their FE and PE, obviously at Civil Engineering Academy. Yeah. So there's definitely some value there, and I always recommend people to earn that if you can, and it's never too early or too late, to get into the game and do that. Speaking of maybe too late in the game, do you have any fun stories that you could share of helping an individual that's maybe early in their career or even late in their career, that you have found inspiring or silly or funny or just a good one? So
I'll talk about one. I'll give you two. So early in my career, recruiters are very resourceful. And I remember I was trying to fill this intern architecture role. This was years ago. And I was trying to find this person any way that I could. And I found them on Facebook and we connected. So that was an interesting place to start up a chat with an architect. I do think they should all, everybody should be on LinkedIn and make sure their profile's filled out, because recruiters are definitely reaching out via LinkedIn. Check your messages. Never hurts to have a conversation. And then a sweet story, a friend of mine called and she's like, can you help my dad? He's basically at retirement age. He's a structural engineer, PE, great experience. She's like, but my parents got a divorce and he needs to earn some money. And I just need you to help him get back to work. And so he and I had a great conversation. I was like, look, are you wanting to go back full time? Like, you're basically at retirement. And he said, I'll do contract or part-time. And I was able to put him in touch with a friend who needed someone kind of on a project basis. And that worked out. And that's why recruiting is so rewarding, just being able to make the match. It literally is like matchmaking, which is why you saw Chief Matchmaker.
I like it. The title works.
It's very much like dating, it's like the timing has to be right. Both parties have to like each other. Everything has to work out. And then, you got to keep courting each other to make it work long term.
Well, that's amazing. You're a matchmaker. Well, let's go back to your book, The Career Architect. I'm just curious some of the nuts and bolts of writing that. Like, how long did that take you to come up with and write from finish to end?
Yeah. I guess about a year is when I worked on it. We have an office in Tampa. And so when I would go down there at night, sometimes I would have a glass of wine and write. And then we've got a private office in our bigger office here in Raleigh, because as most recruiters know, you sit in a bullpen, but I do have a private office. So I would come in here and work sometimes. The fun part was really digging back, thinking about what I wanted to write, creating the outline, and then digging back through all the old podcast episodes. And one chapter, I talk about Danny, who's our LinkedIn rep, who is way more than a LinkedIn rep. He's absolutely incredible. And he says discomfort is his compass. And he talks about when he was looking for a job in tech, how many interviews he had and how skilled it made him at negotiation. So that's a chapter in the book. And then another woman I spoke to, her name's Alice, and she talks about gamifying rejection. So it's all about putting yourself out there. And so I think for female or male engineers, no matter, in your career, you're going to have to put yourself out there. You're going to have to show up and ask for what you want. And she's a writer, so she does pitches all the time, and said, and very much like anybody in sales, you have to collect the no's to get to the yes. And she would gamify it so it wouldn't feel so horrible. That's awesome. So I just loved her story as well. And there's some other really great stories like that woven in.
That's amazing. You mentioned that, you were laying all this out. I'm just curious, rewinding everything. What was the genesis of the book? Did you always know you wanted to write a book, or is it that you had helped so many people, you thought this would be a good idea to get into a book, and you started developing it from there? Like, what was the starting point for that?
I think maybe as a kid, I thought I would write a book. And then as I became an adult, I'm like, I have nothing to write. I don't know, what stories would I tell? But yes, now I'm helping so many people. And just finding out, I think as you get older, everyone is so similar. Everyone comes up against imposter syndrome. Most people have challenges setting boundaries, these things that show up in your career over and over again. And it's like, how can I continue to get better? How can I put myself out there? Even if you're fearful, just take the next step. And so I thought, if I could lay all this out, I can't coach everybody one-on-one. There's not, there's tons of coaches out there, but it's costly. It takes time. I'm like, what if they have a book in their hand that they could read? They could work through the workbook and the questions at the end of each chapter, and that would really be a guide for them. They could do it on their own pace and, for $20.
I love it. Well, this has been awesome, Bryce. The Career Architects coming out in October. You've shared a lot of great tips with us. Just great career tips. Where can our audience find out more about the book, or even when to purchase it when it comes out?
Yeah. You can go to brycebatts.co. So BRYCEBATTS.co. And then if you're looking for a job or coaching, you can go to mycareercollective.com. And I'm always on LinkedIn. I love to connect with people on LinkedIn.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and link all those resources. I think you're doing fantastic work out there, but appreciate you jumping on. Any last second tips or anything else you'd like to hit on?
I would just say, don't let fear hold you back. I think there's things in the back of our mind we all think about doing. And look, everyone's so caught up in what they're doing themselves. If you make a fool of yourself, they're only going to remember for a few minutes. You may as well take the chance and do it so you don't regret it.
I love it. Great tips. Well, thank you again for doing this, Bryce. I wish you all the success in the world, and we'll have to have a future chat later.
That'd be awesome. Thanks so much for having me, and I love all that you're doing at Civil Engineering Academy.
Thank you. We'll see you later.
Thanks.